Good day. I'm Chania Stempowski, Joint Managing Director of Odgers Berndtson South Africa. The pandemic has accelerated technology advancements across all areas, including business, health, e-commerce, and education. Today, I'm joined by Robert Paddock, entrepreneur and co-founder of Get Smarter, an online education organization that has educated over 200,000 professionals in more than 154 countries, and partners with universities such as Harvard, Cambridge, MIT, Oxford, and Stanford. Get Smarter sold to the NASDAQ-listed 2U in 2017. Rob is now the founder and CEO of the Valencia Institute, a global private online high school which partners with top schools and universities across the globe. Rob has been described as the Elon Musk of digital education, and he's here with us today to share some insights on online education. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks so much for having me today.
It's a pleasure. So as a start, please can you tell us a little bit more about Valencia Institute, its origins and its ambitions?
So Chania, it's Valencia Institute is a global private online high school. I guess really the origins, I've been thinking about this business for the last decade plus, having built Get Smarter and really seen the impact that high quality digital education can provide to learners throughout the planet. My analysis was that the online high school space was still radically undermatured. So having exited Get Smarter in 2018, took a little bit of time off, and then immediately started thinking, okay, it's time to get into the next opportunity. So we launched in September of 2019. We had our first cohort start with us in January of 2020. And then, of course, the global pandemic hit in March of 2020. So I guess fortuitous to be having launched an online high school at that point. And certainly we've been really running after and experiencing the positive uplift of the growth since then.
Excellent. And did you see the pandemic, specifically lockdown, destigmatizing online education and demonstrating that it can work at scale?
It's a really good question. I'd say yes and no. Yes, because I think that for a lot of learners, they found that actually they could study very effectively online. And this idea that you have to go into the physical classroom every single day and you have to sit in traffic for an hour and a half each way and so on, actually maybe there's ways that we can think differently about that.
Yes.
On the other hand, we've seen that there's a lot of learners who have found that because of the nature of the provision of their online education, which is really just kind of all day Zoom classes where they don't get to interact with each other. It's really just the teacher talking at them and then them go off and do their homework, that they found actually a very unsatisfactory learning experience as a result. Okay. So one of the areas that we're constantly trying to distinguish is that online learning is not online learning is not online learning. This is an art and a science that if you purpose build an online learning experience from the ground up, the experience is radically different from that, and full compassion to teachers around the world who had to make this radical transition in kind of neck-breaking speed. But it's very different attending a purpose-built online high school as compared to a brick-and-mortar school that's had to make a kind of makeshift offering in the online domain.
And what do you focus on when you say kind of purpose-built online education?
So again, coming back to the experience that we had at Get Smarter, my consistent experience is that technology is a wonderful enabler for education, but is not a suitable replacement for the role of humans in the learning process. So when we think about designing the online learning experience, when we think about facilitating online learning, we're constantly viewing technology and the things that it can do more effectively and efficiently than humans, so that we can use human time to do the unique things that humans can do, such as help students with their actual application of the skills to real world challenges, such as facilitating discursive interactions, such as having private one-on-one conversations with learners to help understand, it's not just about learning, it's not just about subject matter acquisition, it is about the development of the whole human. So how can we make sure that the teachers and mentors actually have rhythms and meeting cadences with learners where they can assist them with the socio-emotional development that they might be going through and so on. But all of this has to be very carefully planned for and implemented in the online environment. It doesn't just happen by accident. So whereas in a traditional classroom, what you would find is that teachers would kind of notice from the corner of their eye that Johnny's, looking a bit disconnected, is kind of a bit more isolated than normal. Let me have a little side conversation with Johnny after class. Those sorts of opportunities are less intuitive in the online space. So you've got to purposefully create systems that can track and monitor that sort of thing, and then rhythms where teachers and mentors and so on can actually have the opportunity to engage, to have quality time with those learners.
Okay, that makes sense. And where do you see the global online education trends at the moment?
I think it's different depending on the sector. In the online school sector, we're seeing massive growth right now, I think, as could be expected. I see in the primary and secondary space a much stronger move towards blended learning. And what we mean by blended learning is that there's both some digitally mediated element as well as in person for the student schooling experience. That for me is really exciting, to start to see that technology can again streamline a lot of the areas which are just far more efficient for technology to effectively take over and allow teachers to do what they can uniquely do. For me, that's a really exciting trend. In the domain of tertiary education, I think that online was already increasing kind of tenfold year on year in terms of its adoption. And COVID has completely accelerated that adoption curve, which is very, very exciting to see. But again, I think that there's a great opportunity for blended learning in that space as well. And then professional development, I think that area we still are at the very early stages and seeing what's going to transpire there. I'm so excited about a future where we realize that we can't just study once and expect that that's going to set us up for the full duration of our professional careers. We need to constantly learn, unlearn, and relearn throughout the course of our careers. And so taking away the mindset that learning is about completing courses with certifications towards the idea of this kind of continuous learning cycle where in a more granular fashion, your learning is being recognized in your credentials. That you may have heard the concept of micro-credentialing.
Yes.
You're constantly building up this portfolio of evidence, which is really showing examples of your work, the sort of credentials that you've achieved. And this is seen as a lifelong journey of learning, as opposed to just these kind of units in time that result in certificates.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We're actually seeing that in the corporate environment by people being moved from one division to another division and getting exposure to various functional areas within an organization as they transition up to more of a leadership role, so they kind of get to the top with a balanced view and have a more rounded understanding of different areas and have been
completely
kind of forced into the learning cycle.
Love that.
Very interesting. And with regards to the standard of education in South Africa, that's often seen as quite concerning. Do you see online education as a means for high quality learning being more accessible to more?
Absolutely, without question. So to give you a stat that just kind of punched me in the gut the first time I heard it, in the Western Cape alone, we have about 23,000 new learners that come into the Western Cape as a result of population growth and population migration. We've got budget to build 4 new schools every year. That's additional capacity for 4,000 new learners. The remainder of those learners either get shoved into already overcrowded classrooms or they get lost in the system. And to be clear, this is not an issue that is unique to the Western Cape. This exists in every single province. That was pre-COVID. Now, after COVID budget cuts, the exact numbers haven't been released yet, but we have very little budget to build new schools. We simply can't, even if we had the budget, we can't build schools fast enough, we can't train educators fast enough, and we certainly can't get the educators to go live and work in the areas where the high quality education is most desperately needed. So we've got a very interesting systemic issue that if we don't start to think differently about solving, we are going to get deeper and deeper into the hole. So I'm incredibly enthusiastic, and we can talk about this at length if you'd like. Very enthusiastic about the role of technology and digitally mediated education, which can provide a link for teachers and learners, regardless of where they're geographically located, throughout the Western Cape and throughout the country. We simply don't have an option not to think about digital in this domain right now.
Very interesting, and I definitely agree. And in that sense, do you think that online education can future-proof education locally and internationally?
And I think it's interesting because online really is just the modality in which the education is delivered. Some of the skills that you get pre-qualified for by virtue of the modality is that as a student you're using a laptop computer, you're doing a lot of research in the digital domain, and that is obviously those are important skills for the future. I think what's more interesting for me than the modality is the curriculum. What are we focusing on teaching our learners? Are we focusing on the retention of facts so that they can regurgitate them under exam conditions? Or are we looking to create problem solvers? Are we looking to create creative thinkers, collaborators? And that's very much around the curriculum and the educational design, what we would call the pedagogy of the program. How have we designed these learning experiences, and what are the innate skills that are going to be developed as a result of completing the exercises, the activities, and so on that are intrinsically baked into the educational program?
Yeah, that's very interesting. Do you see kind of more courses on technology? Because I mean, as the world moves forward in technology, you don't really see education systems and the curriculum adapting to that from a robotics, tech, IT perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the big challenges about tertiary institutions is that the intersection between the institutions and the accrediting bodies means that there's a lag time in terms of the accreditation of new programs that are industry relevant. We used to live in an economy where things would change very slowly. So if it took you 3 years to get a new program accredited, well, it took you 3 years. And it's probably just as relevant as when you started the application process 3 years ago. Now, if you're teaching AI or digital marketing or anything like that, and you want to get your curriculum accredited and, you want to submit your curriculum and it only gets accredited 3 years later, it's completely redundant by that stage. Yeah. Completely is probably too strong. It's largely redundant by the stage it's been accredited. There's a very challenging systemic issue in that interplay between the accreditation bodies and the institutions. This is one of the reasons why we're seeing non-credit bearing education rising so quickly. The idea that we need to get quickly to the market with industry relevant skills as they are relevant to empower the world of employers and employees to actually have job relevant skills when they need them. And so this for me is one of the reasons why not only is non-certified credentials on the rise, but also industry certified credentials. So the idea that actually corporations are starting their own internal academies and their own internal universities, because the approach is just, we can't wait for academia to catch up with us. We've got to get ahead of this, because if we don't get ahead of this, we're going to have a business crisis. And so even though education is not our business, it's a critical enabler in order to enable our business. So I think the space is moving so quickly, and hopefully we'll start to see, at least in the formal education sector, we'll start to see a shorter lag time between education institutions and their accrediting bodies.
Okay, very interesting. So most of our clients are corporate organizations, and one of the things that we are seeing is a trend that they're all working remotely at the moment. But as a corporate organization, they're really struggling with the big question of how do you build and support culture remotely. Do you have any advice to share?
Certainly. Yeah, so we had started Valencia before the pandemic as a remote first company, not a remote only company. And what we meant by remote first was that, and again, this was pre-COVID, we wanted to provide the flexibility that remote work allows for people so that they can work from places that suit them, so that they don't have to deal with the unbelievable hassle of things like traffic and parking and so on, at least not on a regular basis. That said, there are some distinct challenges to remote only, which I think all of us are experiencing that I don't need to necessarily list, that can be effectively mitigated by having some sort of regular cadence of in-person meetings. Now, to be clear, right now in many parts of the world, that's not possible because of COVID. So I think in many ways, many of us just need to grit our teeth and to get through this period and realize that it's fairly short-term in nature. But what we will be doing as soon as the kind of COVID regulations allow is that people will still be able to come into the office space. It will be a co-working space. You don't have a designated desk. But if you need to come into the space for key meetings and so on, you can. But everything has been set up to be done remotely. In addition to that, key cultural events, like in our case, we have company gatherings every single Monday. If you are asking people to come together for key cultural events where you're sharing information, where you're giving people a chance to have those critical side conversations, the kind of water cooler conversations, where you all have lunch together and so on, it's amazing what a difference it makes, literally just to be able to connect with your colleagues in person kind of once every week or two for something that's not just kind of task-based, outcomes-based, work-orientated kind of interactions. So that would be the first thing I'd say, is that by my estimation, a blend between in-person and remote, where the majority is remote, but there are key culture events that are in person, is a really interesting way to think about it. I guess the second point is that for all of us right now who are in this almost exclusively remote first environment, my biggest, the biggest challenge that we've had and the work that we've strived to do is to make sure that we inculcate the right sort of rhythms within the company culture. A lot of the communication that would have happened so intuitively in the office environment, you have to purposely recreate opportunities for that in the virtual environment. So, regular things like daily stand-ups between cross-functional teams that need to take place, quick check-ins that are pre-scheduled, that are in everyone's diaries and that are complete non-negotiable. Weekly meetings with your manager, absolutely critical, because you're not just going to bump into them in the corridor and have that quick opportunity to kind of make sure that you're aligned on a particular task or challenge or whatever the case may be. Things in our case like company gatherings, where everyone comes together and we make sure that it's not just me droning on at the entire company. Different people get to own the company gathering and add their own flavor and their own personality into the mix. Different staff members choose the introductory song. We've got an opportunity for staff members every single week to celebrate the success and the great work of their colleagues. We have values badges awards every single week. So you try to think about the things that make people feel that sense of kind of cohesion, which you often miss in the remote environment. One other example of that is that we do kind of what we call from the front lines report backs. So staff members that are in different functional teams that are doing this amazing work, but is quite unseen by the rest of the company because everything's remote. We're doing showcasing of that work, making sure that people are seeing the great work that's happening. And you can't believe what a difference that makes in terms of how connected it makes you feel, even though you're in a remote context.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been lovely to hear more about Valencia Institute, as well as your views on online education and this new era that we're heading into.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.